Hi, everyone. My name is Yan Fan, and I'm the co-founder of a company in Tokyo called Chrysalis. My co-founder, Connie, and I started in 2017 as a coding bootcamp, and during the pandemic, we pivoted into doing coding training for large Japanese companies. Now, my co-founder and I started the company with just the two of us, and we now have grown to over 40 to 50 staff. And I've made a million mistakes along the way, and I feel like I never know what I'm doing. So I hope that by sharing my mistakes with some of you, it will help you to avoid the same mistakes. So I want to start my talk talking about context switching. Context switching is when we shift our attention going between different tasks or projects. And if you Google context switching, you just get article after article about why it's bad. In my previous life, when I worked as a software engineer, context switching was bad. I remember my colleagues always complaining about it, because getting pulled out of your coding flow when you're super focused, to have to interview someone or take a meeting with your product manager, it sucked. But if you're an entrepreneur or a manager, context switching turns out to be a feature, not a bug. It is a key part of your job. And when you're starting up a company, you are the person doing it all. And what you do swings in all sorts of directions, every day, every hour, every minute. For me, in the early days of Chrysalis, it was lecturing, dealing with a student, editing curriculum, budgeting, posting on social media, doing an admissions interview, running an event, making new curriculum, prepping for the next day, interviewing potential hires, cleaning, all in one day. Right? Context switching was vital for me. And for me, I actually really loved it. It was exciting. We were starting a company. And as my company grew, the complexity of it grew as well. We, luckily, had more customers, which meant we had to hire more employees. We created more partnerships, and we got more revenue streams. What I was responsible for doubled, tripled, quadrupled. And I found that when this happened, I really struggled. At first, I thought it was context switching. But I later realized that what was actually making my life tough was granularity switching. Now you might be wondering, what is granularity switching? Well, it's a term that I came up with to describe the level of detail that we are working on and how it shifts. It gives a bit more nuance to context switching. Granularity for me is a micro and macro spectrum, where on one end you have tactical, on-the-ground tasks, and on the other end you have vision, strategy, things like overseeing multiple projects, overseeing a company. And to explain this, to explain granularity switching, I want to use the analogy of a tree. So when you have a tree in its infancy, just a few centimeters high, it's easy to see it all. You can see where it's growing towards, you can see the shape that it's taking on, you can see the little roots growing and sticking out. But as time goes on and your tree grows, it becomes harder and harder to see that tree in its entirety. Now this happens gradually, but soon you realize that this baby tree that you started requires you to climb up and down, right? And I think of companies in a very similar way. As your company grows, the vision at the top of the tree and the execution at the roots, they grow further and further apart. And when your tree gets to 3, 4, 5 meters tall, going from looking at the top of the tree to looking at the roots takes a lot more effort. Now, granularity switching, in other words, is having to go up and down the tree. In a company, it's traversing vertically between the top of the company to the bottom of the company, and everything in between. With an ever-expanding list of things that needed to be done, I could not traverse my company's layers as easily anymore. And just like how climbing a tree can be tiresome, right, especially if you're doing it every day, many times, granularity switching too much in a growing company tired me out, and I guarantee it will also tire you out. Extreme granularity switching had me, for example, going from talking about vision level, existential issues in one meeting to deep thinking about fixing a customer service process the next. And I remember being in execution or task level meetings at the roots of the tree and having difficulty keeping cool. Why did I need to be here? Why can't they do this without me? I need time. I need time in my life to think about the big existential crisis on the horizon, not about troubleshooting this customer service issue. Because if I don't solve the big existential crisis, there will be no customers. There will likely be no company. That is a terrible reaction to have in a meeting, right? What those people were doing are really important to the company, and I knew that. And I had to reflect on why I reacted the way that I did. And in reflecting, I found that what was happening was that I was having to do some extreme granularity switching every day, and it made me terrible at every layer that I was operating in my company. When I was at the top of the company in the vision layer, my mind kept wandering to execution level details and the fires that I needed to put out. And instead of seeing the company as a whole, all of the branches, all of the leaves, my head kept jumping into smaller details that biased my decision making. So instead of looking to see how to best help the tree grow, what shape it should take on, what the weather looked like, I was too busy going up and down, expecting parts of the tree and not looking at the whole. On the execution layer, in those detailed meetings, my mind kept thinking about the vision level existential problems. And there were so many new details that emerged week after week that made it difficult to keep up with everything going on because I was not always there. The tree had gotten too big. There were too many branches, too many leaves, right? Taking a step back and freeing myself from the execution layer allowed me to see when the branches were growing the wrong way, to assess the weather and the surroundings a bit better, to figure out which branches to trim and what direction the tree needed to grow. By decreasing the degree of granularity switching I was doing, it gave me the time and space to think about the company holistically and make decisions that would benefit the company as a whole. And as a result, we got closer to identifying and solving core problems in our company rather than just treating the symptoms that popped up in various teams. So, does this situation sound familiar to any of you? You don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneur to experience what I'm describing. This shows up in our day-to-day lives as well. Now, I had some solutions that are much easier said than done. Number one, are you necessary? Ask yourself if you truly need to be in the meeting or doing the thing that you are doing, right? Number two, what is the result that you want to see? Figure out what you need to see for you to step away, right? What are the results that you want? Number three is who can you rely on to do it, right? Figure out if there is someone who you can delegate that accountability to. And if there is no one, you may consider either hiring someone who can do the job or potentially even reorganizing the team under someone else in your company who can oversee it, who you can trust. Now, these are short, simple, bittersweet, and very frustrating solutions. Bittersweet because if you're like me, I found it bittersweet to remove myself from the execution level. Not because I wanted to micromanage, but because I genuinely liked doing those jobs. That's why I started the company, right? It was fun lecturing. It was fun creating curriculum. It was fun to be involved. But for the company to grow, that wasn't where I was needed. Now, it's also frustrating because the reality is that carrying out the solutions will take a lot longer and be much more complicated than the Harvard Business Review articles make it out to be, right? When you're dealing with people's emotions, a shifting and growing company, the pandemic and things happening in the world, and your own inexperience, right? Simple solutions written in self-help books, in business books, and articles are often far from simple. The obvious solution sometimes feels impossible. So if you are overwhelmed, let me assure you that that is normal. So I hope that as you are building your company, to pay attention to what level of granularity you're on and how large your tree has grown. It may help you avoid some of my pain. But sometimes the only way to learn is to make mistakes. So whatever mistakes that you make along the way, just know that they are a part of the journey. You can't make progress without making mistakes. It is not easy to run a company full of people. And if you think that it is easy, well, you're probably either delusional or you're lying. So, thank you so much for listening, and good luck.